the Friday Night Show with Bradshaw and Ives.
That will grab you. Even with me explaining it, you'll still be like, whoa, okay, this is strange.
That must be so cinematic as well, to like have that.
It was.
That must be so cool.
What seems to have happened is a global catastrophe on Earth, an unexplained global catastrophe. We don't quite know what's happened. Set in 2049 as well, so just under 30 years in the future. And it seems like one man's basically been left behind. We don't quite know why, but it seems like he wants to man projects on Earth. It soon becomes apparent that it's because, he's trying to essentially, any returning spaceships that have been out to try and find new habitable planets, he's trying to warn them off and, send them back on their way back out into space to carry on their mission. That man obviously is George Clooney. Very early on, he finds a young girl hiding out in his secluded base that he's in by himself, and he basically becomes a reluctant father figure, much like we were talking about last week with News of the World. Which I thought, I didn't know that going into the film because I didn't really know anything about it. But I have checked; it's not a spoiler. It's in the trailer. It is known that this happens right at the start of the film, so don't worry. He finds this girl, and then it's basically about him trying to again ward off these spaceships from coming back because they need to go out and find these new habitable worlds. Large, obviously, proportions of the Earth have been wiped off by the looks of it. We don't know why. We don't know what's caused it, but something's happened. For the rest of the film, I found it very enjoyable. I have to admit, I was expecting it to be quite plodding, particularly after the first act. The first act is quite slow, and I was going, okay, is this why it maybe got a low review? It's not got enough kind of substance to get behind it that you're going to get invested in. But there's quite a few solidly crafted action sequences. There's one absolutely breathtaking action sequence out in space on one of the spaceships that we're talking about here, with something I've never seen in any space film, where they've essentially shown what would happen to blood in zero gravity. Well, as we know with anything zero gravity, particularly liquids, they form a bubble and they float around, don't they? And it was very chilling to see that depicted. And I thought back to myself, I've never seen blood depicted in that way, where it just floats around you. And obviously the panic you'd have if you suddenly see that you're bleeding, and you're not bleeding in the natural way. You're bleeding like from a little bubble that's like floating apart from you. It was really, really well done, and I think that will grab you. Even with me explaining it, you'll still be like, whoa, okay, this is strange.
That must be so cinematic as well, to like have that.
It was.
That must be so cool to see that happen, and yeah.
Well, that can actually neatly bring me to another point. Was that this film was shot in what is basically the digital equivalent of 65mm film. So it was shot digitally on an Arri Alexa, but on a 65mm digital basically version of film. And they were obviously filming that way because they wanted it to be screened in IMAX theatres. Obviously that didn't happen because of COVID. So unfortunately got released onto Netflix. But that being said, I would say if you have access to, the biggest screen you have possible in your house, do it justice and put it on that screen, because it does work very well cinematically. And there is a whole spacewalk sequence as well, where the camera is basically never the right way up. It's always off to the side or upside down, and it is very disorientating, so it works very well. And I'm there going like, can you just please have it just central and normal, because I want to be able to, I want to not feel sick. You do get the spatial nausea of just watching it that way. But very well done. So it's got a lot, I would say, going for it. It's got a great cast as well, in Love Old. You've got David Oyelowo, you've got Kyle Chandler, who most people know from probably Wolf of Wall Street, the investigator in that. Obviously George Clooney and stuff as well, and Felicity Jones. So there's characters in there that you're going to be able to get behind, that are going to do the job very solidly as well. And as I say, I was pleasantly surprised by it. I was expecting it to be a lot worse than it was, partly because of what I'd gone into knowing. And I think sometimes it helps, maybe sometimes when you have a lowered expectation, that you go in a bit more open-minded and a bit more expecting it to be worse. I will say it's not 4, but it is slightly below. So I'm going to give it 3.5. I think it's good enough for that. And obviously, if everyone remembers the rating system from last week, 3 is a really good film still, a very good watchable film. So I do recommend, it's a film that you'd like, and particularly if you like a sci-fi drama. I would say Netflix describes it as ominous. I think ominous is possibly the wrong word for it. It's got grueling moments, but it's still got bits of hope. It's got bits that reminded me of The Martian, where, you know, there's that light-hearted nature to it. But it's also got the low moments where there's some dramatic scenes going on. There's some life-threatening moments going on as well, and they do it very, very well. So, yeah, a solid 3.5 stars. And if you're into sci-fi, I really recommend it. I think you'd enjoy it.
I definitely think that that's the next one that me and Neve are going to watch.
You're doing very well at keeping up with my recommendations, I believe.
Yeah, well, what I do is each week you give a recommendation and I watch it. And that's what the listeners should do too.
The Friday Night Show with Bradshaw and Ives.